Hello everyone, today I want to make a video about another film that I collect that would be in the physical format. Especially, like I've said before, I've noticed that the physical format is pretty much on its way out. For example, there are plans of releasing future films on different, that would be resolutions. That would be like, for example, the 8K resolutions. But I still have doubts that that's going to be released in a physical format, which is quite a shame. Now, this film happens to be 1982's version that would be of The Thing, John Carpenter's version of The Thing. Because, yes, technically this film, I really love this film. And I also want to let you know exactly why I happen to love this film quite a bit. This is technically a remake. Now, originally this film was a black and white film from back in 1951. Now, I have seen that film. I do own that film as well. That would be the original. But this one, it's different. They really place a lot of detail onto this version, this remake. This is in fact a remake. And this is also based on the original book, which was called Who Goes There? Actually, this one's a little bit more faithful to the book compared to that would be the 1951 film. There was also a prequel made not too long ago, back in 2011. I do own that one as well. I actually don't like it as much as this one. I do appreciate just 2011. That would be the prequel, because it really answered many questions that I personally had. It does answer a lot of questions, but I still feel like the amount of dedication and detail that was placed onto this 1982 version, it was much better, at least to me. That's just my own opinion. You might think that the 2011 version is a lot better than this one, but everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Now, I do collect this film in many formats. This is in fact a Blu-ray. Not just any Blu-ray, it's a 4K UHD Blu-ray. I do collect the Blu-ray format. I just started collecting it about 5 months ago. About 5 months ago, I told myself, I think it's time. It's time to visit the Blu-ray format. I know it had been released for a long time before, but I really was kind of like setting it aside. I wasn't ready for that. I really wanted to, that would be, visit the vintage formats. The old formats from the 90s, the 80s, the 70s. But it came to a point where I said, okay, it's time. It's time. Let's visit this format. And I gotta tell you, it's a wonderful experience. I'm gonna tell you also, I'm gonna talk about the Blu-ray format in this video. This video is not gonna be short. I always pour my heart out. I do my best. My videos, they're not long. It states so on my description. So let me go ahead and focus on this right here. All right. Now, the reason I always kind of walk into my videos, because I do in fact live alone. I don't live with anyone else, so that means that there's nobody else that can kind of help me make these videos. Now, I make these videos out of enjoyment. I don't get any money out of my videos, and I really don't plan to receive any money from my videos. I just try to inspire others to collect these vintage items, physical media. Okay, now this is in fact the Blu-ray version, but I don't really want to start with this one. I want to show you this one in a lot of detail. I own quite a few versions of the Blu-ray copy of this film. Now, this happens to be my favorite of all. I want to tell you exactly why, but not yet. Now, just like my previous video regarding, for example, the Pretty Baby film, which is, it's also a huge film, but I believe this one's even more special, more collectible as well. Absolutely, incredibly collectible film. It's a very special film. I gotta tell you, they really don't make films like this anymore, which is quite a shame. Let me go ahead and start with the beta format, which I also collect. I still don't have a beta machine. I'm kind of setting that aside. When I decide to buy a beta machine, I want it to be a very special machine. There were many models and innovations regarding the beta machines, so I'm kind of like taking my time, you might say. So yes, the beta format, wonderful format. Like I said before, a very polished product. Now, this film was in fact released on the beta format, because back in 1982, the beta format, it was still being sold. It was still being used by the consumers. Absolutely. Beta had a big run. as well as VHS. Both Beta and VHS, they had huge runs. This format was released back in 1975. I love owning this on the beta format. I mean, even though I have the Blu-ray, you might be thinking, okay, you have the 4K UHD Blu-ray of this film. Why not just keep this guy and just get rid of these? Because technically, I mean, it does. This technically has a lot more resolution, wider color space, better sound. For example, 5.1 sound. Absolutely, this does have it. Obviously, this does not. I mean, it was not possible to store a 5.1 audio track onto the beta format. I mean, considering all those things, I still keep the beta copies of this film because I happen to love this film. I think that every single physical format that this film was released in, it's very special. They're special in their own ways, especially for me as a collector of vintage media, vintage technology. Now, I own quite a few copies of this film in the beta format. I mean, I've noticed, I mean, technically the amount of views I've been receiving lately has dropped quite a bit. But that doesn't bother me. Like I told you, I do this out of my heart. I do this sort of like a personal journal. And I really want to inspire others. Let me show you this in a lot of detail. Now, this happens to be the version that comes in a slipcase. Just like, for example, the VHS format. So it comes in a wonderful slipcase. Nice presentation. I mean, compare it to the Blu-ray. This is very, actually, this version of the Blu-ray, it's very faithful to the original. I mean, look at the front covers. Yes, they're very similar. I really appreciate that very much. I mean, for example, the steel cases, I mean, they're special in their own ways. But like I told you, I plan to tell you exactly why I love this one the most. Even compared to the very expensive, that would be the tin cases. I mean, some of these, they cost $50, $80, in excess of $100. But still, that version right there is my favorite of all of those. Okay, wonderful slipcase. This is in fact cardboard that would be printed. It has a very nice sheen to it. Let me kind of move this on. See, look at that. Very nice sheen to it. I mean, you're probably familiar with the beta format. Let's look at the side. I mean, all beta releases had a specific number. This happens to be BTA 77009. Very nice. Now this is the rear of that would be the beta version of this film. It says The Thing in very big letters. Very nice. This happens to be the actor Kurt Russell. He's a very good actor. He made many, many films, especially during the 80s. He made the most films during the 80s. Wonderful films regarding both horror and sci-fi. For example, Escape to LA. I do own Escape to LA. I think it's a very fun film to watch. But he made many others, like for example, Big Trouble in Little China. It is also sci-fi, science fiction. I love all of those films. I love Kurt Russell quite a bit. A very good actor. This is the character that would be R.J. Macready, which in this film, the other characters, they mostly call him Mac. They kind of nickname him Mac. Or Macready, which would be his last name. They mostly either call him Mac or Macready. Again, I'm going to give you a few spoilers, not much regarding this film. For example, you might not have seen this film. Now, regarding this film, now obviously I didn't see this film in theaters because I was actually born the same year that this film was released in theaters. That would be back in 1982. So it would have been pretty much impossible for me to either watch or even remember. I mean, I was pretty much a newborn back in 1982. The first time that I saw this film was back in the 90s, the early 90s. Now, back in the early 90s, this film was shown on television quite often. Not just by the English language TV stations, but also by the Spanish language TV stations. Now, the first time that I saw this film was thanks to the Spanish language TV station that would be Telemundo. Telemundo would show this film very often, and that was the way that I first was introduced to this film, thanks to Telemundo. Okay, I'm gonna give you a lot of my personal opinion regarding this. I mean, beyond showing you my collection, I'm gonna tell you a lot of my personal opinion. I mean, you might have different opinions regarding this. I mean, I welcome you to leave questions and comments regarding this film. It's a very iconic film. Absolutely. For example, if you collect either horror or sci-fi, this film is both a horror and a sci-fi film. It's a double whammy, you might say. It gives you a lot of horror, but it also gives you a lot of science fiction. Regarding, for example, aliens. Yes, aliens that are in fact involved in this film, which is sort of like a little spoiler. But it's not a big one. I mean, you probably already know that this film has that would be the concept of aliens on it. Okay, let me read this, and I'm going to show you this very well. For example, you might own this film, or you might in fact stream this film. Because yes, I know this film can be streamed via streaming services. I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's new ones all the time, which is wonderful. But there's nothing like owning this film in the physical format. I mean, at least to me. It says John Carpenter, director of Halloween, The Fog, and Escape from New York, continues his phenomenal string of his hits with The Thing, a new version of the classic horror thriller starring Kurt Russell. That would be him right there. It's set in the winter of 1982, which is actually the year that it was released in theaters, at a research station in Antarctica, where a 12-man research team finds an alien being that has fallen from the sky and has remained buried in the snow for over 100,000 years. Now, yeah, I mean, for example, for me as a human being, to even process that an alien aircraft landed on Earth 100,000 years ago. I mean, it takes a while to kind of process that. It's like it's a shock. Yes, absolutely. Because for example, it's a wonderful concept. I mean, it hasn't been proven yet. I mean, I think it's a matter of time. For example, if we are in fact not alone in the universe. It is a concept. I mean, it hasn't been proven yet. It's a concept. But I think it's a matter of time. For example, the wonderful James Webb telescope that was recently launched into space. I mean, it may or not, in fact, let us know if we are in fact alone or not in the universe. Like I told you, I think it's a matter of time regarding that. So yes, this is in fact both a horror as well as a sci-fi film. I mean, at least regarding this moment in the here and now, the concept of alien life, it is in fact a fictional concept. But I mean, I think it's a matter of time until we can definitely prove that or not, if we are in fact alone or not in the universe. That's another reason why I love this film. I mean, I happen to love that concept, the alien concept, because I have faith. I do have faith that they do in fact exist. Because I mean, considering the staggering size of the universe, the fact that it's growing every single waking moment, I mean, it's amazing. All right, it says, soon it is unfrozen and unleashed, creating havoc and terror as it changes forms and becomes one of them. Okay, the concept of a monster, it's basically I mean, at least in this film, the aliens are in fact monsters. You might say they have evil intentions. Absolutely. Their intentions are in fact evil. For example, speaking of bad intentions, when this, I mean, this is wonderful history here. I mean, you can read about that history. You probably already know about that history if you're watching this video of mine. I mean, this is my video. This is my own personal take on this wonderful film. You might have your own personal take. For example, if you've been thinking about making such a film, when you give your own opinion, your own comments about this film, please do. I would love to watch those videos. For example, if you own physical copies of this film in the physical media, I would love to see those copies. They deserve to be shown. I mean, I feel like I want to show my physical copies of these films. But that's just my own opinion. Okay, that concept of a monster changing forms, it was a very innovative concept. For example, on those classic monster movies, for example, Frankenstein, for example, The Blob, The Mummy, The Werewolf. I mean, wonderful, wonderful black and white iconic films. The monsters in those movies, they don't really change forms. This film had that concept where a monster changes forms. It was something sort of innovative. And I love the fact that it placed this concept onto this film. It makes it a very interesting film. It's another reason why I love this film so much. The monsters, they change forms. They do in fact change forms. Wonderful concept. It's a very interesting concept. It's a fun concept. For example, this is not a boring film. Not at all. It's a very fun film. It's action-packed. It's a very fun film to revisit. I revisit this film quite often. All right. Put this frightening story together with outstanding performances. Incredible special effects by Roy Arbogast. Makeup by Rob Bottin. And special visual effects by Master Albert Whitlock. And you've got a movie that Time magazine describes as horrific. Now notice right here it says visual special effects. Now, like I told you, they really don't make movies like this anymore. They don't. I mean, this is my own opinion regarding CGI. That would be computer generated images. I feel like they're overused. I mean, there's nothing wrong with using CGI effects, but don't overuse them. I mean, this film absolutely uses that would be physical special effects. For example, stage blood. For example, fog. The fog in this film is in fact real fog. For example, there are ways to create that would be CGI fog, but you really can't compare it to the real thing, actual fog. It has a unique look to it, for example. This film, they did that. They use physical special effects and they look incredibly realistic. And that's yet another reason why I love this film so much. It uses physical special effects. It's not easy. It's difficult. It takes time. I know that. It's expensive. For example, it's a lot cheaper to use software, a computer, to show an effect than to use mechanical robots. For example, they use a lot of KY jelly. I mean, I really appreciate, for example, like I told you, the Blu-ray format. For example, on the Blu-ray format, you get to see how this film was made. I really appreciate that very much. There's, for example, featurettes and commentaries with the directors and the cast in this copy. That's why I really love this copy. But still, I love this copy as well. Now, you can read this via many wonderful online websites. They use 5-gallon buckets, many of them regarding KY jelly in this film. I mean, that's something that modern day films, they don't really do anymore. You use physical, that would be props, like in this case, KY jelly. They use a lot of KY jelly because it has a very specific look to it. It has sort of like that slime look to it. All right. Now this is a wonderful still image from the film itself. This is actually someone using that would be a fireproof costume. Those are actual flames right there. For example, there are ways to recreate artificial flames, like I told you, using CGI, but they didn't do that in this film. They used actual flames, actual explosions. There's many explosions in this film, but they used actual dynamite in this film. It had a huge budget. Compared to like I told you, the original installment of this film, that would be the 1951 installment. For example, in the 1951 installment, you don't see many, for example, explosions like you do see in this film. Actually, the original book, which is called Who Goes There, it does in fact talk about explosions. But back in 1951, it was very difficult to do such a thing. Back in 1982, they had the technology, that would be the motion picture industry. They had the technology to create wonderful explosions. And they did that in this film. Okay, a while ago, I was talking about bad intentions by the aliens. Okay, back in 1982, there was quite a few films that were released in the exact same time. Now, one of those was E.T. Regarding that, let me go ahead and pause this right now just for a second. All right, I'm back. I live in a little tiny studio, so that didn't take too long. That would be E.T., the Extraterrestrial. Now, I love these two films for different reasons. Believe it or not, these two films were released in the exact same year, in the exact same time frame. So when people had the opportunity to watch these two films, they pretty much saw this film more because it also had a huge budget. It has wonderful special effects as well. This one, they use a lot more that would be advertisements for it. For example, MCA Universal, it's a huge company as well. Amblin, huge company. They really did a wonderful job advertising this film when it came out. It was shown on television quite often. They actually did sort of like a sneak peek regarding this film. They were letting people know that this film was going to be released pretty soon. That sort of creates a little bit of hype. People were excited about this film. So technically, at the box office, regarding the amount of sales, ticket sales, this one released a lot more ticket sales compared to this one. To me personally, I love these two films for different reasons. I do own these two films on the physical format. I love these two films. I revisit these two films quite often. So since this film was released at the exact same time, that kind of it made this film kind of flop, you might say. The numbers regarding the ticket sales, they were not that good compared to, for example, E.T., the Extraterrestrial. It's wonderful history to know. You might know that history yourself. It says right here, John Carpenter's The Thing, starring Kurt Russell. That's him right here. Screenplay by Bill Lancaster. Special visual effects by Albert Whitlock. Special makeup effects by Rob Bottin. Notice it says makeup effects. Obviously, those were physical effects. That's actual physical items that you have to place on either the characters, the cast, or that would be the physical monsters, robotic monsters, actual physical monsters, not CGI, like I told you. Music by Ennio Morricone. Okay, now unfortunately, Ennio Morricone, he's no longer with us. He passed away. Now, he made many wonderful film scores and soundtracks on many wonderful films. He was very talented. For example, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He did it. He was in fact involved on the soundtrack for that film. Now, I also own the soundtracks for this film, which I want to show you a lot of detail in this film. Like I told you, this is not going to be a short film. I mean, a short clip. Ennio Morricone. I happen to really love the soundtrack. I mean, it's quite an interesting soundtrack. For example, there's no singing on that soundtrack. It's just instrumental music. But it really reminds me of watching this film. It's very interesting soundtrack. It's quite unique. I do like listening to the soundtrack to this film. I listen to it once in a while when I'm walking. I love walking. For example, before I made this video right here, I took a short walk. It was like a 30-minute walk. I love walking because I receive so many wonderful ideas. For example, when you're walking, your system receives a lot of oxygen. It really helps when you're trying to kind of get wonderful ideas regarding anything in general. Now, before I make these videos of mine, I take a short walk. For example, this is not scripted. I'm not reading anything. I'm just coming out of my heart right now. Now, my videos, they're pretty much real time. Besides those short little moments that I pause. For example, I had to pause this video to kind of grab this from my closet. But that's just the way that I make my videos. I like making them in real time, non-scripted, just coming out of me, coming out of my heart. Okay, it says right here, warning, the motion picture contained in this video cassette is protected under the copyright laws of the United States and other countries. This cassette is sold for home use only, and all other rights are expressly reserved by the corporate copyright owner of such motion picture. Any copying or public performance of such motion picture is strictly prohibited and may be subject to the offender to civil liability and severe criminal penalties. And right here it says, Video Cassette Incorporated, MCA. This is wonderful to see. Obviously, they don't use this anymore. This sort of like a lettering anymore. It's just very iconic. I mean, there were many films that had this. They no longer have it. For example, you won't see that on the modern day DVD or Blu-rays. This is wonderful to see. That's why I really love owning this on the beta format. It says right here, 70 Universal City Plaza, Universal City, California. 91608. Now, California. Yes, Hollywood. Hollywood is in fact in California. Now, there's many films that are made in the Hollywood area. I mean, I happen to live in California. I love I mean, I didn't always live in California. For example, I was born in Mexico. My parents brought me to California when I was 2 years old. From Mexico. And I appreciate that very much. I love California quite a bit. It's a very... for example, Chris, if you're watching this film, I know you don't live in California. You live on the opposite side of the United States. That would be the East Coast. And we do talk quite often. And I tell you like little things about my everyday life. For example, how much I pay for living expenses, how much I pay for my studio apartment. And I'm pretty sure that you think I'm crazy regarding that, because obviously where you live, the prices are much lower. But still, I love California for quite a few reasons. Yeah, I tend to deviate on my videos. I know that. This is basically a rant. I mean, I have no problem stating that. My videos are pretty much rants. I rant about many different things. All right, wonderful. The inside is white. There's no need to paint the inside. This is in fact cardboard. Wonderful. So I do own that one. Now, it's wonderful to see that this is the beta, you might say, variation of beta that has that white colored top. Not all of them have that. Some of them have that black color. That would be the top where the actual media comes out of. It's wonderful little things that are very special for me as a collector. It says right here, the thing, color. 127 minutes, rated R. Now, regarding those 127 minutes, that's basically 2 hours and 7 minutes. Okay, now, that's quite a long runtime. For example, considering that this was released in 1982, films that didn't have such a long runtime as this film. They pretty much had a slightly shorter runtime, you might say. Because I've noticed something. I've noticed that the films in general, at least in the here and now, they've been having very long run times, which is not, it's wonderful. I mean, obviously, if you have a longer runtime, you have more time to tell a story. You can take your time. You can make the film feel like it's not rushed. For example, this film, it is definitely not rushed. For example, right in the beginning, you don't get to see that action right away. It takes time. You might say it's a slow burn. It gradually comes in. For example, by the time you reach, for example, the 40-minute point, that action really kicks in. It does, but it doesn't kick in full blast. It gradually becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and stronger. And I love that. I love the fact that this has a wonderful sort of build-up to it. For example, in the beginning of this film, you're introduced to the characters. Okay, John Carpenter. I don't know if you're watching. You're probably not. I mean, you're a very busy man. If you're watching this, I really love what you did on this film. Nobody makes films like this anymore. That's another reason why I like this film. Nobody makes films like this anymore. I really appreciate it quite a bit, Mr. John Carpenter. It's a slow burn. It starts off slow. For example, if you like action films that start off with a lot of action right away, you might not like this film. It's like I told you, it's a slow burn, but it's worth it. Like I told you, by the time you get to that 40-minute mark, I mean, you're gonna get a whole lot of plot twists. There's a whole lot of plot twists on this film, which I really like. I love plot twists. It kind of throws you off. It makes you think. Okay, now regarding this film, when I first saw this film, I didn't fall in love. I'm gonna say, let me tell you the truth. I love this film. I absolutely love this film quite a bit. When I first saw this film, I was basically a child. I didn't fall in love with it right away, which is probably the reason why when this was released in films, people didn't watch it, for example, more than once. Some people saw it just once and they just said, oh, okay, I guess it's nice. And they never saw it again. For example, it was only after this film was sold that people really got the opportunity to fall in love with this film. For example, like I told you, I never saw this film in theaters, but I did see it on television. And like I told you, it was shown on television quite often. When I first saw this film, I thought, okay, nice, not bad, nice film. The second time I saw it, I was like, okay, there's something special to this film. I don't know what it is. There's something special to it. I don't know what it is. I have to watch it a few more times. By the third time that I saw this film, I was like, okay, yes, there is indeed something special about this film. Now, by the fourth time that I saw this film, okay, I'm convinced. I love this film. I really, really love it. Like I told you, it wasn't on the first watching. It wasn't on the second. It wasn't on the third. It was on the fourth watching that I realized I absolutely love this film. Okay, I don't want to give away too much bloopers about this film. I just want to let you know there's quite a few concepts on this film, and they're wonderful concepts. For example, leadership. This does in fact deal with leadership. This does in fact deal with trust. Who do you trust? It's a big thing for us as humans. You have to trust someone. Now, this film definitely deals with trust. It's another reason why I love this film. It deals with leadership, trust. It also deals with another subject, which is very difficult. It's a subject, I didn't even know what you call it. For example, now this is in fact like a blooper, not a blooper, a spoiler. For example, whenever we have children, for example, your vision of life itself changes. You realize that you're going to fight for that child to the end. You're not going to give up. You're going to do everything you can to protect that child. For example, I don't have any children. I'm not a father. But I do understand that concept because I've seen it. For example, my sisters, my cousins, they do in fact have children. And I've physically seen how their life changes after they have a child. Now, the monsters in this film, I'm going to show you those monsters, not just via images, via physical mediums. I own physical mediums regarding the monsters in this film. There comes a point where the characters in this film, like I tell you, this is sort of like a spoiler. They have to realize that their own lives are worth less than humanity itself. And now that's a huge concept. Like I told you, it's a difficult concept, but it is in fact on this film. And that's another reason why I love this film so much. The characters in this film, it comes to a point where they realize they have to do whatever it takes, even sacrifice their own lives in order to protect humanity. Absolutely. I mean, without humanity, it's over. There's nothing. It's gone. Everything. I mean, history is gone. It's no longer, it will no longer exist without humanity. That's a huge concept, and it's in this film. That's another reason why I love this film so much. It's a huge concept. All right. Yeah, I'm giving you a lot of my own personal opinion because I'm gonna tell you, this is probably one of my 5 most loved films in general. I love this film quite a bit. Yeah, beta format, very nice presentation. Look at this right here. This happens to say The Thing right here. For example, on a physical, that would be a spinning disc. Obviously, you won't see on the side of the disc because it's so incredibly thin. It's a different presentation. I love that copy quite a bit, but I also love these quite a bit, like I told you. Very nice. Beta format. It is in fact a cassette-based format. You probably know the beta format quite a bit. All right. Now, I happen to own quite a few copies of this film that would be on the beta format. This is another one. For example, whenever I decide that I love a film, I really try to own that film on the physical media. For example, if I didn't love this film, I wouldn't collect it on the physical format because there would be no need to. For example, there are in fact films that I don't like. For example, I don't really buy them on the physical format. I just watch them once and I probably never revisit them again. Now this I did, like I told you, I did revisit it quite a few times because I knew that there was something here. It was hidden. I mean, it takes time to kind of decipher those little things. Now, this film is not a straightforward film. It takes time to kind of unlock those little things. It's sort of like a mystery film, you might say. That's another reason why I like this film. This mystery. There's leadership. There's mystery. There's many aspects to this film, and I really love those. It's a very nice package, you might say, regarding this film. Oh, this is another one. I really like the fact that it has the original, that would be the plastic seal on it. It still has it. I mean, regarding its age, to have a beta copy that still has that plastic. Now, this is in fact used. It was in fact viewed But I really like the fact that it has the original plastic on it. Not just like that other one, this one also has that would be the white top cover. I love owning these. That would be the physical media. So this one doesn't have the original plastic. This one does. All right, wonderful. Yeah, this is yet another one. Like I told you, I love collecting physical media. It's something very special to me as a collector. I decided about 5 years ago to collect physical media regarding wonderful films. Now, I do consider this film to be vintage because, yeah, it was in fact released back in 1982. For example, the prequel that was released back in 2011, I don't consider that one to be vintage. I mean, it might become vintage in the future, but at least to me, it's not a vintage film, at least not yet. Now, this is another copy. Now this has a number on it right here on a sticker, 2272. I don't know why. That might have been like sort of like an inventory number. Because some of these were in fact rentals. They were in fact rented. For example, this one. Notice this right here. I want to show you this because this is a lot of wonderful history. Warning. If this tape is tampered with, customer must purchase. Yes. Since these were in fact rented, I mean, you probably won't find rental places anymore. For example, this Blu-ray copy right here, I don't think you'll be able to find a place that rents Blu-ray copies. Okay, let me tell you something. Like I told you, I absolutely plan to deviate on this video of mine. The price of this physical copy. Now, I bought this via Amazon. I mean, Amazon, it's a wonderful service. At a click of a button, you can have such a copy sent right to your mailbox, which is, it's a concept that didn't exist back when I first watched this film, back in the early 90s. But it does exist in the here and now. Now, I paid, it was actually on sale. This copy was on sale on Amazon. Now, believe it or not, this cost me $16. I mean, considering the fact that this was only $16, it's a wonderful value. Yeah, $16 for... Actually, this has two discs inside. It has both the Blu-ray, but it also has the 4K Blu-ray. It's a double disc presentation. The fact that it only costs $16... For example, these beta copies, you won't find them for $16. I mean, no way. These cost a lot more than $16 in the here and now. These have become, in fact, collectible. These are collectible. I mean, these are collectible as well, but at least they're very easy to acquire. Yes, $16, wonderful value. These are not 16. This will be between 35. I mean, I've paid up to $60 for these. I mean, I'm willing to pay that much because it's something very wonderful. I mean, they're quite difficult to acquire. They don't pop up on eBay, for example. I mean, I use eBay quite a bit. It's probably the online service that I use the most regarding collecting. I mean, there are others. For example, Yahoo auctions, the Japanese Yahoo auctions, for example, Etsy. I mean, you can in fact buy videotapes, beta VHS, laserdisc on Etsy. It's wonderful, but I mean, they're not as popular and as they don't have that kind of selection that you'll find on eBay. eBay has one of the best selections, I'm gonna say, in the world regarding vintage media. So I do own 3 of these. I mean, look at this image. It's wonderful to see. To be able to see both beta videotape copies of these films next to a Blu-ray. But I do own more. Let me I love using these guys as sort of like background images because I do collect this format quite a bit. It's not the format that I collect the most. That would be the 1977, but also 1976 VX format. It's quite an interesting, it's quite a weird format. I love collecting that one quite a bit. I mean, I do like using it as sort of like a placeholders, backgrounds on my videos. Okay, now this is another beta copy. Yes, I know, I'm absolutely crazy about physical media. I love it quite a bit. Now, I didn't always love it. For example, back in the early 2000s, I didn't own any physical media. I mean, none at all. I didn't own a single DVD. I didn't own a single VHS back in the early 2000s because I pretty much, I saw everything via online sources. But it wasn't until I became older that I realized that I really wish to own these wonderful films. That would be on the physical format, physical media. So yes, this is yet another beta. I love the fact that it says beta right here. I mean, I don't know who placed this sticker. It was probably placed by the rental places to kind of let you know that this is not a VHS. For example, it would have been awful if somebody would go ahead and rent or buy such a videotape and get home and try to place these on their VHS machine. Because yes, they don't. That's not possible. They don't fit in there. These, for example, the sprockets themselves, they're not aligned. For example, on the beta, they're much closer to each other. On VHS, they're farther apart. Yeah, they're definitely not compatible with VHS machines. That's why they probably placed this right here to let you know right away that this is in fact a beta copy, not a VHS copy. I also own this film in the beta format, which I want to show you in a lot of detail. This is wonderful to see. This was in fact an X rental. It says ADI's video. It's very difficult to read because this was used quite a bit. It was rented quite a few times. There was a lot of wear and tear right here. It's difficult to see what it says there. But I appreciate these kind of stickers. For example, when I buy these, I don't remove these rental stickers. I think it's something very wonderful to see because like I told you, the concept of renting videos in whatever format it may be is pretty much gone. I mean, they do exist, but I mean, very few rental places compared to the ones that there were around in for example, the 80s and the 90s. For example, Blockbuster, for example, Hollywood Video. There were very common places. They were used quite a bit. This one also has that label that says, let me kind of focus. It says warning. Violation of this label will provide evidence of internal tampering. Yeah, so pretty much the rental places will kind of look at this seal. If this seal was either broken or missing, you would pretty much have to buy the videotape. Yeah, wonderful history. For example, I remember when I used to, I never actually rented films because you had to kind of create sort of like an account with those rental places. Sometimes they would ask, for example, your ID. They would ask for your driver's license. Now, back in those days, like I told you, I was a child, so I didn't have an ID. I didn't have a driver's license back then. So I couldn't rent. But for example, my parents, my father, he would definitely rent. That would be videos from rental places back in the 80s and the 90s. It was a wonderful concept. Like I told you, it's pretty much not used anymore. So yeah, a wonderful image right there. 4 copies of the beta format along with the modern day 4K UHD copy of this film. Wonderful. Now, this is not the only format that I collect this particular film in. Let me kind of fast forward a little bit. That would be to the laserdisc. Absolutely. I also collect the laserdisc. I enjoy it quite a bit. This happens to be the okay, I know it's weird. For example, whenever I have a choice between buying that would be either a widescreen or a pan and scan 4:3 aspect ratio copy of a film, I absolutely try to buy the 4:3 aspect ratio pan and scan. I know it's weird. I know that technically you're missing a huge portion of both the right and the left side of the film. But that's just my opinion. For example, I've only physically been to the theaters, movie theaters, about 10 times in my entire life. For example, I don't really kind of enjoy interacting with other people. I pretty much live sort of like a hermit style life. So I don't really visit the theaters quite often. Now, something very wonderful happened recently. It was the 40th anniversary of this film. That was back in June of 2022. Now, there was an opportunity to watch this film, believe it or not, in theaters. For example, I didn't see this film in theaters when it was released back in 1982. So when I found out about that concept, the ability to watch this film in theaters, due to the fact that it was the 40th anniversary of this film, I said, yes, absolutely. I'm going to go to that presentation, that modern day presentation of this film in theaters. And it was a wonderful experience. I mean, I can absolutely say that, yes, I did in fact watch this film in theaters, but not back in 1982. I saw this back in June 2022. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I don't know if you, the viewer, saw that, had the opportunity to see that. That would be a modern day presentation in the theaters regarding this film. Now, I've read a lot of comments regarding that. A lot of people said they used sort of like an inferior copy. They projected an inferior copy because it was sort of like a DVR made copy. For example, they didn't project a Blu-ray 4K copy of this film. They projected that would be a DVR made. That would be a digital video recorder made. It was pretty much streamed. They streamed that video content to all the theaters. Some people didn't like that. I mean, I didn't mind it at all. For example, I don't consider myself a videophile. For example, I don't mind watching this film, even though it has less quality, less resolution, less performance than the 4K UHD Blu-ray. I still watch this guy. I think it's very nostalgic, especially the fact that like I told you, this is not in widescreen. This is in 4:3 aspect, pan and scan. It's very nostalgic. Like I told you, the first time I saw this film was in fact on television. When they showed this film on television, it was not the widescreen presentation. It was the 4:3 aspect ratio presentation. And that's very nostalgic to me personally. It takes me back in time to those days when I used to watch this film on television. Yeah, very nice presentation. Very, you may say, faithful. This was in fact the original poster for this film from back in 1982. They will show this image. For example, there are other copies of this film that they don't show this particular image. They show a different image. I own those. I'm going to show you this in a little while. Like I told you, this is not going to be a short film. I mean, no way. This film definitely deserves a very detailed, very long. I mean, this is my own comment. This is my own take on this film. For example, if you're thinking about making a video where you give your own take on this film, please do. It deserves it. It says right here, I want to show you this in a lot of detail. John Carpenter's The Thing. This is wonderful to see. Laser video disc. Stereo. Okay, now this is in fact in stereo, which is wonderful. I mean, stereo audio. I mean, especially this film. For example, there's many scenes where there's gunshots being fired. Absolutely. But not just gunshots, explosions as well. When you have a stereo audio track, it's very interesting. It's very fun because you can pretty much differentiate. You know where those shots are being fired from. You know where those explosions are happening. I really love the stereo concept. For example, this one, it goes beyond stereo because it's a multi-channel. It even has a dedicated subwoofer track, which it really helps. It's wonderful. But I still appreciate a stereo track. I'm going to say it's a bare minimum. For example, there are other copies of this film that don't have a stereo track. But I really appreciate that this one does. That will be the Laserdisc. It says right here, MCA Video Disc Incorporated. Notice this incorporated. Yeah, Laserdisc. There was quite a few sort of variations regarding Laserdisc. It had many innovations, you might say. For example, it wasn't always called Laserdisc. There was a time where it was called DiscoVision, which has its own special, unique look to it. For example, I do own DiscoVision video discs. They're special in their own way, even though they're sort of like this is a much improved variation of the Laserdisc. I still collect DiscoVision. It's special in its own way. Now, unfortunately, this was never released on DiscoVision. It was released on Laserdisc. Because by 1982, the DiscoVision concept was no longer used. It was no longer manufactured. It was pretty much abandoned. This was pretty much the progressor of DiscoVision. I really like this one. Like I told you, the fact that it's not widescreen. I know it's weird, but that's just my own personal opinion. I happen to love the 423. See back there, that's my monitor. I use that monitor whenever, even this one. Believe it or not, I use that monitor, even though it's not widescreen. I use that guy whenever I watch this film. I'm going to tell you a little bit how I do such a thing. I know it's crazy, it's weird, but that's just my own take, my own personal opinion. Okay, it's a wonderful bar scanning code right here. It says home video version. Yes, like this is not in mint quality. You can see a dent right there, which I really don't mind. For example, I only own one copy of this film in the Laserdisc. For example, I don't own the widescreen presentation. Like I told you, I don't really like it that much. I really love the 4:3 aspect ratio, but that's just me. It says right here, a Truman Foster Company production. John Carpenter's The Thing, starring Kurt Russell. This has a lot of information, a lot more than the beta presentation, which I really like. I really like the Laserdisc format because it's so big that you can have a lot of information. For example, this one also has a lot of information on it, which I really love. Okay, screenplay by Bill Lancaster. Special visual effects by Albert Whitlock. Special makeup effects by Rob Bottin. Music by Ennio Morricone. Yes, he was very talented. Director of photography, Dean Cundy. Associate producer, Larry Franco. Executive producer, Wilbur Stark. Co-producer, Stuart Cohen. Produced by David Foster and Lawrence Terman. Directed by John Carpenter. John Carpenter, he did a wonderful job. Based on the story Who Goes There by John W. Campbell Jr. Read the Bantam book. It's telling you that the book, I mean, it's still sold in here now. Mostly via digital download. That would be ebooks. For example, Kindle. Amazon Kindle. You can buy the book via Amazon Kindle. You can also buy the audiobook. For example, those have become very popular. But there's nothing like owning something physical, owning the actual book. But that's just my opinion. This is a wonderful still image. This is in fact a widescreen still image. Even though this presentation is not in widescreen, they place a widescreen image. That would be an image still of this film. That would be the character Macready. Notice his beard. Notice how it has eyes on it. Okay, now regarding that, another concept of this film, which I really love, is isolation. Yes, isolation. Okay, Speaking of isolation, let me show you a few of other films that I also collect that deal with isolation. Okay. For example, this is a huge film. I mean, yes, Chris, if you're watching this, I know how much you love this film. I know how you place little like snippets, sort of like influences, you might say, on your animations. I love your animations. That would be the Macy's. The Macy's. Yeah, Stanley Kubrick, The Shining. Oh yes. I mean, I'm gonna say this, but just my opinion. Just like this film, John Carpenter's version of The Thing. This film as well. When I first saw this film, I really didn't like it right away because it's a long film, incredibly long film. It's way longer than this one. Absolutely. It says right here, the runtime of this film. It's a very long film. Let's see. Okay. It says right here, 142 minutes. Yeah, that's quite a long film. I mean, considering that the date that this film was released, it was a very long film, especially in the theaters. To be that long in a theater, you have to be captivated. For example, okay, this is something wonderful. Okay, Chris, I know you're watching this. Now, I've told you about this film. I know you don't like it that much. But that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But regarding these two films, they both have a slow burn. Absolutely. I love that concept, that slow burn. For example, in this film, you don't see that action right away. It takes time. It's wonderful. That means that it requires multiple viewings. Absolutely. Both of these films require multiple viewings because there's these very small details that if you don't get those details on the first viewing, you'll get them on the second or the third or the fourth. I mean, that's the reason. Actually, when this is based on what you told me. I mean, thank you, Chris. You know so much about the 70s and the 80s. You know, I'm gonna say it. You know a lot more about it than I do because you really focus on those vintage movies way more than I do. Like I told you, I've only been collecting for 5 years, which is not a long time. And I'm impressed by your age. I mean, Chris, you're young. You're very young compared to me. I'm 40 years old. But still, considering the fact that I'm 40 years old and you're pretty much 18, you know a lot about these films, way more than I do. And I love that. I mean, I consider you my friend. I love having a friend like you because you know a lot about this. The Shining, it requires multiple viewings, just like this one. It does require multiple viewings. Both have isolation. For example, actually both of these, they have that concept of snow. Snow, believe it or not, it's an isolation medium. Especially this one, because this one, it's in Antarctica. I mean, if you walk out and you stay out there, I mean, it depends on the weather. It may be either a few minutes or a few hours. You're gonna freeze to death. So you pretty much have to be indoors most of the time that you're in Antarctica, or else you die. Now, regarding this film, it also has snow. So the characters in this film, they have to be indoors. That kind of creates isolations. You're pretty much trapped in there. Whatever happens, even if something good or something bad, you're going to be trapped in there. And both of these films have that aspect, and I love that isolation. It pretty much it makes the characters that would be trust run thin, incredibly thin, razor sharp thin. The trust becomes so thin in these two films. And I love that. That's another reason why I actually love this film as well. Okay, now don't feel offended, Chris. Regarding these two films, I absolutely love this one more. But I know that you love this one more than this one. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just personal opinions. So yes, isolation. This film absolutely has that concept, isolation. This film as well, it's a big one. It's a huge one, especially amongst collectors. That would be the original, because there was quite a few installments of this film. That would be the Blair Witch Project. Yes, these two also deal with isolation. Now, there's no snow on this film, but there is isolation due to the fact that they're pretty much stranded. That would be in the deep forest. When you're in the deep forest, for example, you have limited food, resources. If there's anyone next to you, you pretty much want that person, because whenever you're in a group, you increase your chances of survival. I mean, both of these films deal with that. Survival, trust, isolation. Wonderful concepts. This one also requires multiple viewings. This used to be shown quite often back in the days, back in the early 2000s on television, mostly on cable TV. I love these two films, but still, I love this one a lot more than the Blair Witch Project. Absolutely, I love this one quite a bit. But they both deal with isolation, trust, leadership as well. The characters in both of these films, it comes to a point where somebody has to become the leader. Somebody has to step up and become the leader. Yes, wonderful concepts. But there's other films that deal with this concept as well. The Abyss. I love this film quite a bit. This happens to be the laserdisc. It's not in perfect condition, but I love owning it. Yeah. Laserdisc, they did a wonderful job regarding presentation. I mean, look at that. That's huge. Many wonderful images, a lot of information about this film. Okay, this film, The Abyss, it also deals with isolation. I mean, water, deep ocean, incredibly deep ocean, thousands and thousands of feet under the water. You're isolated. I mean, if you just walk out there, not only are you going to die because you're going to run out of, for example, oxygen, you're going to die because you're going to die of hypothermia. When you get down there, there's like basically no heat from the sun. You're pretty much like in space, the coldness of space. So yes, isolation. This film also deals with isolation, as well as trust, as well as, for example, plot twists. Wonderful, wonderful films. See, I'm deviating here right now. I know that. Okay, now let's get back to this wonderful presentation. Now this happens to say 1982 color, 108 minutes. Extended play. Yeah, 108 minutes. Notice that, 108. Now regarding the beta. Notice right here, it says 127 minutes. It's different. 127. On this one, it says 108 minutes. It's different. I know that. That's why I collect so many different presentations of this film. Some of them are longer. Okay, now regarding that runtime. Now this one's incredibly long because like I told you, it does have, for example, commentaries, featurettes. Okay, let me say something right now. That's just my opinion. Okay, regarding these three formats, I'm kind of placing them in order by the way that they were introduced to the public, to the consumers. Laserdisc, also known as DiscoVision. DVD, which means digital versatile disc, versatile. And Blu-ray. I mean, there's also the HD DVD, which sort of like somewhere in between these two guys. I do collect HD DVD, but unfortunately, this film was never released on HD DVD. Okay, now regarding these three, I mean, based on presentation. Amazing presentation. Incredible presentation. I mean, it's nice, but I think like it didn't really try that hard. The DVD, the presentation that it has, it really doesn't really stand out that much. I mean, look at this, very basic. This is a simple paper that was printed. No, I really like the presentation on the Laserdisc a lot more. Blu-ray. Wonderful presentation. I mean, I actually like Blu-ray a bit more, but this is not bad. This is it really is a step up compared to DVD. For example, there was quite a few variations of the presentations on DVD, including this film. I do own this film on DVD, but I'm not even going to show it because it's so common. For example, if you type in The Thing DVD, you're going to find all kinds of results. I don't even want to show it. I'm going to open this guy in a little while. Not yet. Incredible, amazing presentation. It's all right. It's okay, I guess. Wonderful. Not bad. I really like this presentation. It's wonderful. But I really like that one a lot more. But that's just my opinion. Okay, now... video quality and performance regarding these three. They're different. Now, specifically this film from 1982, it was definitely originally recorded onto, that would be film. Absolutely. Back in 1982, film was the format to use. It was the most advanced format. I mean, at least at the time. There were more advanced formats that were released later on. But around this time, film was the go-to format. So this was definitely recorded onto film. That means it does have, for example, film grain on it. You can see those little specks of color on it. It has a very specific, very unique look to it. For example, on this presentation, the Laserdisc presentation, you can definitely see the film grain, which I happen to love. I love seeing the film grain because it really it takes me back in time to those old times of the 80s. Yes, film grain. Now regarding DVD, now it does have film grain on it, but not much, because technically the DVD format in general, it was a MPEG based format. That would be the motion pictures experts. It was incredibly compressed format. For example, there was a very sort of like compressed, blocky look to it. For example, some of these were single layered, some of them were double layered, and some of them were also super bit. What super bit was everything regarding, for example, menus was omitted. It was removed. So they can place the bit rate as high as possible on the video itself. Now, some titles receive that super bit. For example, the Terminator series, they definitely released it on the DVD format in the super bit presentation. That means more bit rate because those other, for example, menus, extras, like featurettes, that would be like commentaries, were removed. But at least to me, my own opinion, even if you buy the that would be the super bit version in the DVD. I mean, at least to me, it still looks compressed. You still can't see that film grain. I mean, at least as much as I would wish to. So yes, I consider the DVD for. I mean, it's a wonderful picture, but I feel like it was missing something regarding performance. Now regarding this guy, oh boy, I mean, I'm gonna show you some Blu-ray players, which is, I mean, I know it's sort of like a contradiction. For example, if you've seen my videos, which it's not that many. I mean, I'm never gonna compare myself to a professional YouTuber, also known as an influencer. I'm an amateur. I know that. I'll always be an amateur. For me personally, to show a Blu-ray player, to even talk about Blu-ray, I know it's sort of like a contradiction, but I gotta tell you, Blu-ray, they got it right. Okay, now regarding the bit rate, now obviously this doesn't use MPEG anymore. I mean, thank goodness. I really love the fact that this doesn't use MPEG anymore, because MPEG, like I told you, it was very compressed. If they had released Blu-ray and the MPEG format, it would have suffered regarding performance quite a bit. For example, I do in fact use, that would be the digital VHS format, which is this right here. Now, believe it or not, this is in fact a VHS, but it's based on the MPEG, just like DVD. Now, the bit rate on this can go quite a bit high. I'm gonna say, I don't remember too well, but it's about 27 megabits bit rate. If you wish, I mean, there was many options to record on this format. That really helps. I mean, recording via 27 megabits really helps. Technically, the MPEG format, it's a very, it's a bandwidth hog. You have to record on incredibly high bit rates, or else you get that very blocky, compressed look. For example, the DVD format, it never really was released in a 27 megabit bit rate, because it was impossible. It wouldn't fit. You're limited by the amount of data that you can record on this guy. It can either be a single layered 4.7 gigabytes, or it can be dual layered, which I believe it's 8.5 gigabytes. But for still, even if you have 8.5 gigabytes worth of data and it's recorded on the MPEG format, actually it's MPEG 2, this is gonna win, even though it's VHS. So yes, like I told you, it really suffered a little bit regarding performance, but that's just my opinion. But this guy, it really, they got it right. For example, I do own DVD, Blu-ray players that show you in real time that would be the bit rate that's being played at that exact moment. It's wonderful to see bit rates that go up in excess of 100 megabits. Now that's a lot of data. Actually, this format is recorded in okay, let me talk about this. I'm gonna deviate quite a bit because that's just me. I deviate quite a bit, but trust me, it has to do with this. Like I tell you, this is most definitely a rant here. I rant about these formats. This is in fact in the variable bit rate. That means the bit rate changes. For example, if you have a very dark scene with not much color in it, the bit rate is going to be very low. But if you have a very bright colored with a lot of movement, many colors, that bit rate is going to jump up quite a bit. Like I told you, it can be in excess of 100 megabits. That really helps. For example, the laserdisc format, it's a linear format. That means the bit rate on it, it's always the same. It's a, from beginning to end, you're always gonna have the exact same bit rate on it. Just like VHS, just like beta, just like data VHS. Now, some people call this digital VHS, but technically it's called data VHS. I know this has nothing to do with these formats, but trust me, it has to do with it's sort of like the history of these formats. This is also a variable bitrate, which also helped, but it was very limited. Now, Blu-ray, they got it right. I mean, the amount of data that's on here is a staggering amount. Way more than this guy. Data VHS. There's a lot of information on the Blu-ray format. They got it right. I can honestly tell you, even though I love videotape machines, I gotta tell you, Blu-ray, fist bump, wonderful. You got it right. For example, you might say that this is the grandfather. This is the father. This is the son. I'm kind of like humanizing these formats, which is kind of funny, but I mean, that's just my own take. I want to make this as simple as possible. Now, regarding DVD, I mean, it does perform better, but like I told you, I feel like it's limited based on its the technology that was available. Now, regarding this one, I absolutely feel like the laserdisc format it's like it feels, that grandfather feels incredibly proud about this grandson. It performs very well. For example, that film grain. Okay, talking about film grain, let me tell you, I'm kind of really fast forwarding here. I still need to show you my other copies. You can definitely see the film grain on this presentation. For example, there are others. For example, the steel books. On those other steel books, it suffers regarding that film grain. That's why I consider this one my favorite. I don't consider the steel books to be my favorites. This is my favorite regarding the 4K UHD presentation. I have a lot more to say about this, but in a little while. Okay, wonderful. So wonderful films that also deal with, like I told you, isolation. That would be leadership. Wonderful concepts. Now, the physical condition of this disc is not mint quality. I know that. There's like very minimal specs, you might say. Like I've said this. Let me show you the center. Okay. Right there. MCA home video. The thing. Yes. Stereo. Wonderful. Copyright 1982. Now, I love the Laserdisc format quite a bit. Very innovative. All right, let me kind of go ahead and fast forward a little bit. That would be to the wonderful VHS format. Yes, I place VHS as a very special format because I actually used it when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Now, since I'm showing this right now, let me tell you about performance-wise. At least regarding the audio track on this specific presentation. Now, believe it or not, this is not in a widescreen presentation. This is full screen. I know, it's weird. Why would you want to own such a aspect ratio where you technically lose, like I told you, you basically lose like a slice of video here and a slice of video right there. For example, if this was in fact the screen itself, I know that, but I really love that 4:3 aspect ratio. That's just my own opinion. This one has an improved audio track compared to Laserdisc, because read this. This in fact says stereo surround. Yeah, surround. Now this doesn't have a surround track. This only has stereo. For example, there was quite a few different presentations on this about this film on the Laserdisc. For example, some of them were in fact THX certified, which actually had 5.1 channel. I don't own that presentation because, like I told you, I really appreciate this presentation. That would be the 4:3 aspect ratio. So I don't own the either widescreen or the THX presentations of this film. So regarding these two guys, at least the audio performance, this one outperforms because it has Dolby surround. I mean stereo surround. This is stereo, but it's not surround. Yes, wonderful presentation. Very faithful to that original poster from back in 1982. Wonderful format. This has a number that says 77009 Hi-Fi stereo surround. Very nice. It's wonderful to see this right here. This is the original stamp that's placed on the original seal. This is in fact sealed. See, I haven't even opened it yet. I love owning sealed copies. It's very special, at least to me as a collector. VHS. It actually has those two, the exact same images on the back compared to a beta. See? Same images. But it has small little differences. For example, this happens to say MCA right here. It's sort of like a more modern look to it compared to that guy right there with those pink letters and those green letters. Like I tell you, this wasn't used for too long. This was very nice. Okay, so that's the VHS presentation of this film. It's a wonderful image right there. But I do own this. I do own this film on more formats than these right here. Let me kind of go ahead and fast forward. Let me show you another one. I love owning multiple copies of identical items, but that's just me. For example, I do in fact consider myself a hoarder. I have no problem saying that. This is yet another VHS copy of this film. See, it's sealed as well. This is really nice to see because this means that this wasn't sealed. Because I've seen it. Okay, now regarding that, whenever you buy a sealed VHS or a beta or a laserdisc, do try to see a rear image before you make a purchase, because it's happened to me. I've bought vintage formats like these that they're stated as sealed, but those seals are not the original seals. They were sealed later on using a packaging machine. That means that they do in fact have wear and tear. The videotape inside has wear and tear. It's not a mint quality videotape because it was sealed later on by the seller. But this is in fact the original seal because it has that original white colored stamp on it. It says MCA Universal Home Video. I just kind of want to let you know, for example, if you're a collector yourself, try to see a rear image of a vintage copy so you can really trust that it is in fact a mint quality product and not a sealed by the seller product, because it has happened to me. Okay, that's wonderful. So that's 2 VHS copies right there. Laserdisc, beta, 4K UHD copy right there. I love owning these. They all produce different images, different performance, different features. For example, they really don't have those featurettes and those audio commentaries. For example, there was in fact a presentation on the Laserdisc format that did have the audio commentary. I don't own it. I own this one. It doesn't have the audio commentary, but the other presentation, that would be the widescreen THX certified presentation, does in fact have the audio commentary. Now, I really appreciate the fact that this copy also has it. For example, there are in fact some copies that they omitted that the audio documentary by the director, John Carpenter, which is quite awful. I mean, you would think that buying a modern day Blu-ray copy, it would have such a thing, but no. Some of these did in fact omitted that wonderful, that would be feature. All right, but I also own this film on other formats as well. Let me go ahead and kind of go forwards in time a little bit to the CED format, which is also known as the capacitance electronic disc format. Now, not everyone collects this format. I mean, it is quite a flawed format. I mean, I'll admit that it is a flawed format, but still, I collect it because it's special in its own way. For example, now I've said this via my Twitter page, which is I don't really get that kind of you may say love via Twitter compared to YouTube. I mean, YouTube, it's the best. I receive wonderful comments regarding my hobby. This is in fact a hobby. I don't do this for the money. For example, I don't resell. For example, I don't buy these old things because they are things. They are physical items. I don't buy them and resell them. That's not my deal. I buy them and I keep them safe. I collect them. Okay. Yeah, very faithful presentation. Like I told you, it's that same image regarding that would be the original poster from back in 1982. Let me show you this in a lot of detail. CED capacitance electronic disc system, the thing. Now notice that this has the blue colored housing. Now most of the times that meant that this was in fact stereo audio presentations, but not always. I do in fact own some of these that have the white colored housing, which are also stereo. All right, for example, check this vintage. I consider this to be vintage as well. It's quite a rare copy to find in this format. I mean, I own many collections. I want to show you those collections. I mean, including this film. I own it in quite a few formats. I mean, I love showing these. I mean, the videos that I've been making lately regarding my collections of physical media, they're the videos that I watch the most. Me personally, for example, when I walk, I love listening to myself because this is pretty much what I love. So obviously, I love listening to myself because I love this kind of stuff. Notice that this has the white colored housing, but notice right there in the corner, it does in fact say stereo. So you can't base yourself just on the color housing. Some were in fact white colored, but they were in fact stereo. For example, Ghostbusters. I own the Ghostbusters on many formats. I want to make videos about those collections. Oh man, I love doing this. This is very, very fun. Even though I don't get any money out of this, I love this video. The Ghostbusters, see, notice how it has that white colored housing, but notice right here in the corner, it does in fact say stereo. Okay, I'm going to show you this in a lot of detail, but that'll be another video. My other collections of both, like I told you, I mostly collect horror and sci-fi, but it's not the only genre of films that I collect. I do collect, for example, children's films. Okay, yeah, very nice right there. This definitely looks like a poster. I mean, if you weren't familiar with the CED format and you were to see something like this, you would say, oh, look at that. And that must be a poster regarding that iconic film. But no, it's not a poster. It is, in fact, an actual video disc. But they really use that sort of like a poster. It has a poster feel to it, which is another reason why I collect this format. It's very special. Okay, it says right here, the thing, very big letters. It says 108 minutes, a CX encoded video disc. Okay, regarding that is in fact the audio. The audio. Now, regarding the audio performance in all of these formats, this one has to be the lowest performance. Now, there's a reason for that. Actually, the prices of these, the CED video discs, when they were released, I'm not in the here and now because these are quite expensive in the here and now. But back when they were first released, which I believe was back in 1980, this is basically a 1980 format. You started seeing it being sold. around 1980. Now, this format was in fact sold not just in the Americas, but it was sold also in Europe. It is in fact a vinyl PVC based format. So yeah, that's definitely it's gonna take a toll regarding the audio performance. For example, it does in fact have a lot of, that would be noise. You can hear a lot of noise on the audio track, which is fine. For example, I still collect audio cassettes. I'm gonna show you a few audio cassettes right now regarding this film, the soundtrack. I love audio cassettes. I definitely used audio cassettes when I was a kid, when I was a teenager as well. Now, the audio performance on this, it has to be the lowest based on all of these formats that I just showed you, as well as the video performance. The scan lines of this format is quite low. I'm going to say it's a tad bit lower than VHS. Yes, now compared to these, like for example, the VHS format, it produces more video quality than the CED format, but I still collect both. They're both special in their own ways. Now, they actually use different images, which is wonderful to see. Look at this. Look at that size of that image. It's so much larger. It's wonderful. You get to see a lot more detail. Look at that. Actually, you get to see the film grain because it's so large. I'm kind of really zoom in here. Okay, notice right here. That's the wall. It's not a solid. You can see like little tiny specks. That's in fact the film grain, which I really love, and I really appreciate the fact, like I told you, this presentation of the 4K Blu-ray of John Carpenter's 1982 installment of the Thing franchise. You might call it a franchise. You can see the film grain on this copy, which I really, really appreciate. Thank you. Thank you so much for showing that original film grain on this. I love that fact. Okay. Movie suspense master John Carpenter, who brought you Sleepless Nights with Halloween and The Fog, is back with a brand new version of The Thing. The 1950s original had audiences leaping out of their seats and covering their eyes in fear. Yeah, but that was way back in 1951. Now, if you dare, behold the most diabolical screen terror of the decade, with the heart-thumping details of John W. Campbell Jr.'s shocking novel. Yes, he did in fact, he wrote the novel that would be called Who Goes There? In the winter of 1982. Okay, now that's 1982. That's another reason why I love this film so much. That's actually the year that I was born. Yeah, that gives you a little special aspect to this film. Absolutely. In the winter of 1982, 12 men are sent by the US government to study life in the Antarctic. They discover an ancient alien buried in the snow near their research station. Being curious, the men bring it back with them. Yeah, that was a very bad idea to bring back. Because, okay, this is sort of like a little spoiler here. I'm saying little because obviously you can read all of this if you, for example, if you log on to IMDb, for example, Rotten Tomatoes, wonderful websites. You can read all of this, but it's wonderful to see it on the actual media itself. It's something very special to me as a collector. Now, obviously, these 12 men, they weren't equipped to handle such a thing. That would be an extraterrestrial life form. They weren't. For example, they didn't have the necessary protection. For example, you really shouldn't touch such an item, an extraterrestrial being, because you don't know if it's contagious, if it has, for example, diseases. They weren't sent out by the government to do such a thing. They had to decide what to do in that moment. For example, in this film, they're really trying their best to contact land, but it was impossible because the connection was very bad. There's a huge storm